Laura Marie. People leave Scientology and the like for the obvious reason that it is a destructive cult, but it did provide at some point a sense of spirituality and belonging for them. What do you think of the recent decrease in organized religious beliefs and behaviors generally in society, particularly in the millennial generation who say they do not belong to any organized faith? Do you see any similarities in people leaving organized groups, cults, or otherwise? Absolutely, and the common denominator is education and the availability of information, the free availability of finding out what these groups are all about. I'm no fan of organized religion, and I haven't been for quite some time, for pretty obvious reasons. And I've talked about the abuses of organized religion, and yet at the same time I preach tolerance and understanding and compassion for individual beliefs. I will never, get down on somebody for having individual beliefs of their own about the supernatural or God or the afterlife or whatever. I got nothing on that. But when it comes to organized religion, I think that there are so many authoritarian, methods and even totalitarian control systems in place that people aren't even aware of. And the undue influence is amazing, it's shocking. And this includes the Catholic Church and the Christian Church and any church. This kind of thing goes on. It's just part of human nature that when you put people in power positions, they abuse that power. Not everybody, but enough that it's noteworthy. And the abuses with the Catholic Church, for example, are quite extensive and quite horrifying. So that's not to say that every priest and every Catholic priest is a pedophile or something like that, but there's enough that it's alarming, and I'm sometimes alarmed by the tendency of some Catholics to write that off. Then there's the extremism that we see in certain Christian sects, and the Westboro Baptists, for example, or the some of the evangelicals and this sort of thing. These become extremist groups. And of course, I've said it's not just religious groups, but in answer to the question here, the remedy or the antidote or the thing that seems to proof people up against falling into these totalitarian extremist groups is education, right? Is knowing better. And if I had known a few key things when I had first walked into a Church of Scientology, then I wouldn't have fallen for it. But I didn't know those things, and I didn't let myself, come to know those things for quite some time. Because once the way we've talked about the mind control at length, so I won't get into it again here. So I think the same thing that can proof people up from getting involved in destructive cults, generally speaking, keeps people from getting involved in organized religion in the first place, and doesn't necessarily take away from their own ideas of spirituality or the supernatural or the afterlife or God or the nature of those things. And I think that's interesting. I think it's very interesting from what I've seen. We have seen an increase in the nuns. These surveys that get done where what's your religious affiliation? None, right? And yet there's still a good percentage of those people who do have spiritual beliefs of some kind and readily say so. So I think the first line of what education and information gives is we're seeing decreasing membership in organized religious groups, right? We're also seeing and another factor that I think is important with organized religious groups that also drives people away from them is outmoded belief systems and outmoded rules and trying too hard to control too much, right? And we talked about this actually recently on my podcast. The Catholic Church, right, because of its very backwards views on abortion, family planning, birth control, things like that. There's more and more, statistically speaking, there's more people leaving, especially women, over the last 30 years. The number of women who have been attending Catholic Church has been going down at what should be an alarming rate as far as the Catholics are concerned. And that also is a reflection of the Catholics' inability to recognize that women's rights and human rights are a very real thing. And there's much more awareness of that now than there ever has been before. Much more. And statistically, this shows in a number of different metrics. So I think that's also a contributing factor to, people being proofed up against this stuff.